Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different and introduce you to somebody very special to me. This is Beacon Driscoll, our marketing director at Real Prosperity Inc. And we were hanging out, doing some videos, talking, and we're like, this needs to be a YouTube video. So Beacon, can you share a little bit about what's been on your mind and how we can move forward financially?
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Beacon. I really hope that my hair looks good right now. I can't tell because of the camera is facing the other way. You'll have to tell me. So I'm a millennial. I'm turning 44 today, actually. The main thing that I am concerned about in terms of my financial future is over the course of my lifetime, pretty much all social safety nets have been eroded. Don't know about you, but like in my lifetime, my parents had, one of my parents worked and then they stayed at home. So that's not possible anymore. Mm-hmm. So you can't save any of that extra money. The ability to buy a house, almost completely impossible. There's no more pensions. Social Security is on its way out. The House just voted like last week to gut Medicaid. So
as we're recording this,
basically everything that I could rely on for retirement is now gone. And all of the benefits that my parents enjoyed for retirement are now gone. I would joke around with my other friends who are about my same age, and we would say, like, basically the millennial retirement plan is to die before we need the money. I would like to not do that. I would like to have more than 20 more years of life. I would like to have 40, 60. There's lots of fun life still ahead, and I don't want to, basically have to be destitute until the day that I die.
So happy birthday.
Thanks. Fun thoughts for your birthday. The gray hairs come in and suddenly you have to have these conversations.
Yes.
Penelope and I were just talking about like, what would it take for me and people like me to, take, more control over our financial future than in the past when you didn't need to have as much control because there was people propping you up, communities propping you up, governments propping you up. Mm-hmm. And I can imagine that I'm not the only one in this situation because you don't have to be an elder millennial to be running into this situation. You could be like my mom, right? My dad has passed, and so she only has to live one person off of, their retirement income and Social Security income, but they get basically nothing.
Yeah.
And it was a huge, lifestyle shift when they had to go to fixed income. And so I just think that there's probably something that I could do about it as opposed to sitting around and complaining to my friends. Although I complain to you and then suddenly you want to do a YouTube video. So maybe it's not entirely.
Well, we've been talking about your personal finances over time, working together, right? Yeah. Where you're starting to see possibilities that you didn't see before. But I thought that this would be a really powerful thing to talk about because I think for a lot of people, they're like, this is never going to happen for me. I'm never going to be able to make enough money to even like buy a house, let alone, retire someday. And I had never heard this idea that like the millennial retirement plan was to like die before you run out of money. And that's pretty horrifying. And one of the things that comes up for me is that was kind of, I don't know if you know this, but that was kind of my grandma's situation. Like in a way, it was sort of lucky that she died when she did, which was 6 months and a day before my wedding. But, she had gotten to the point where her savings were almost gone. And she was, spending more than what she was bringing in from my grandpa's pension, Social Security, all this stuff. And so it was getting to the point where the next step was going to be that she'd have to sell her house, which thankfully she had a house, right? So she ended up passing away before that happened. So it was kind of like, okay, well, she didn't have to go make those tough decisions at that point. But like, what if you don't have a house? There's just so much tied up in this, and let's talk about it. Yeah. So first of all, I didn't realize you consider so define millennial, because I think of you and I as basically the same age, but I guess I am like 4 or 5 years older than you. So I think I'm Gen X or something. Yeah. I was like, you're a millennial? What? So what's the millennial?
I'm not an expert at this, but I'm going to do the thing where I give my opinion. And of course, everybody in the YouTube comments is going to be like, no, you got this wrong.
Okay, but you are an expert in your own opinion. So
I am an expert in my own opinion. Yeah. And so my experience of this was that people who were in high school. So they were coming of age in the first few years of the millennium. So I was graduated from high school in 1999. So people who probably graduated high school, you know, all the way up until like 2010. So that first decade of the millennium, you know, probably the main experience that I've heard from other people who are millennials is that, like, what kind of experience did you have growing up? So the generation before us, so you're probably like a very late Gen Xer, but you probably got all the way through your formal schooling, so college, before like the internet made it big, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very Gen X thing, which is to be like a pre-internet generation.
Pre-internet, can you imagine? I remember my college, we did have email in college, and that was the first time I had email. In high school, I had a computer that we got a modem. Actually, it was a modem that you hook in, and I remember dialing in, and it was like, did you have that?
So I felt very lucky in that I became fascinated by computers at a very young age. So we had a computer probably before any of my friends did. So yes, if you remember the sound of a dial-up modem, you're probably an elder millennial.
Okay. Or late Gen X.
Late Gen X.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Just wanted to, like, you know, define some terms here. So we're talking about, like, with social safety nets going away, home prices being more like astronomical and crazy, like, what do you do? How do you navigate that? You know? And so I think that one of the ways that we rally around our mission in our company is, you know, we're all about supporting people to create financial freedom, which means having more than enough passive income coming in from your assets that you could totally support your lifestyle and pay your expenses, right? Like, that's ultimately where we want to take people. And I think that where we align a lot is we share common values, right? We value freedom.
Yeah.
We value integrity, connection, generosity, and growth. And so since those are the values of Real Prosperity Inc., you and I are like, yes, let's make it happen. That's a big part of, like, what drives our mission and why we do our events and why we do our coaching, why we do everything, is because this is a big problem. So let's talk about it. Like, I think that where it has to start is deciding to be like your own knight in shining armor. Like, no one is coming to the rescue, you know, no person or government or parent or some, like, you know, authority is going to, like, swoop in and make it all better for you. Now, could that happen? Let's just, like, not plan on counting on that, right? So it's like, yeah, maybe in some cases somebody, you know, might step in and help you out. But I think that the safest course of action is to just be like, hey, I am responsible for my own financial future. And that's the truth in a lot of ways. And this is one of the frustrating things about our system is that, you know, with pensions going away, you know, the whole idea of, like, working for one company all your life and then they'll take care of you, like, that's not the norm anymore. And it hasn't been, right?
Yeah.
And so with that going away, it's like, okay, now guess what? You're responsible for your own financial future. Okay, guess what? We're going to give you no education or resources or support in that. And by the way, it's crass to talk about money, and we're not going to talk about it in our family, and we're not talk about it in our community. And so we walk around thinking that, like, everybody else has this stuff figured out when no one really does.
And we're not going to give you a raise for 40 years, right? Like, minimum wage is still the same as it was when I got my first job in high school, right? It's still like $7.25 nationwide. You know, as much as, like, okay, housing prices have, like, gone up like 5 to 10 times. Like, my parents bought a house in Silicon Valley down the street from your $5 million house in Campbell. They bought it for $40,000.
Amazing.
And my dad was earning $100,000 a year in 1980.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how many people watching this would be like, I would love to earn $100,000 a year?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I love it that I'm earning $100,000 a year, the years that I earn $100,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
So not only are things way more expensive, but our ability to pay for things has gone way down.
Yeah, the ratio between what things cost and the average wages, like, it's insane. And when you look at, like, in the price increases and inflation, because price increases and inflation aren't necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
There's other reasons that prices go up. then you look at like, people's raises, even like the increasing minimum wage, like it's just completely like it's getting farther and farther and farther apart, right? So you can take this like defeatist attitude, like, oh man, well, it's impossible for me. I hope I die before I outlive my money. But is that really how you want to live? I would say that like success is the pursuit of a worthy goal. That's how I define success. And so the truth is that the path to success is almost like defined by a series of failures, And so there's all these challenges and failures you have to get through. But as long as you're like pursuing that worthy goal, like you are successful. And so, yes, life has dealt us this certain hand. This is when you've been born. This is the economy we're dealing with, the financial reality we're dealing with, the policies we're dealing with. You got to decide, you know what? I'm going to play this hand because I don't like the alternative. I don't want to just go die. So like, what do I have control over? What do I have autonomy over? And let's make it happen. And there's a lot of ways. So we can talk more about that. But one thing I want to mention, because you talked about Social Security, we have this idea that retirement age is 65. Do you know where that came from?
You've told me this before, but I don't think that I would get it right. So I'm going to let you say it again.
It came from the Social Security Act in 1935. Do you know what the average life expectancy was at that time?
Probably 65.
60. Do you know what that means? So like the average life expectancy was 60. So they're like, okay, let's make the benefits kick in at 65. So this wasn't actually designed to help most people. It was that safety net for some people who happened to live that long. But the idea was that most people were going to die before they need it. So that actually wasn't just the millennial plan. That was the plan. That was the plan. That was the plan back then. If people managed to make it to 65, that they wouldn't need those Social Security benefits for very long. And that's part of why the Social Security system is breaking down now, is because people are living longer and it wasn't intended to be there for most people. Isn't that mind-blowing?
Yeah. Especially consider when we consider that the primary safety net of our entire country.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Now, one thing I will say, you mentioned your mom, receiving Social Security and how it's not enough. I'm assuming that she was a stay-at-home mom, right?
Yeah.
So that was based on her husband's income at the time?
I would have to ask her. That is my understanding. Again, my family, the only time we've ever talked about money in my entire family was like, hey, grandma just died. Do you want some inheritance? That's like the first time we talked about money in my whole, and she died like 5 years ago, right? So that I got to age 39 before my mom uttered one word to me about money, other than me learning the fact that my dad made $100,000 a year.
A lot of this is financial education. And then there are a lot of life hacks, financial hacks that you can learn about to accelerate this. Your ultimate goal is to become financially free, right? Then what's that going to take? What do you need? Well, you need to figure out how much passive income you need, which means you have to figure out what your expenses are, right? So at any point in your life, even right now, you can look at okay, what does it actually cost to maintain my life? What does it actually cost to maintain the life I want? Because some things you need money for, and some of those things are going to increase in price faster than others. And some of the best things in life money can't buy. So look at what are those actual expenses? And then we can start to build in a plan. Yeah. Right? Because you can manifest a lot more powerfully from a place of clarity. Some people look at basic, comfortable, luxurious, and that's one of the things we've done with clients on our financial freedom calculator is running different scenarios. But I also really like the concept from the book, Your Money or Your Life. Have you read that one? They have this one chart in there that I just absolutely love. It's called the fulfillment curve. And it charts the relationship between money and happiness or fulfillment. And so we think more money's, if I had more money, I'd be happier, right? Yeah. And then you hear other people say well, money can't buy happiness. Well, it kind of can in a way, because in the beginning, more money does correlate with more happiness, which makes sense. If you're not able to pay your bills or, live the life you want, and then all of a sudden you're making more money and you're able to, you and I were talking, you're I could see how maybe I could buy a house. And I couldn't see that possibility before. Yeah. Right? That probably felt good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's that. And then you get to a certain point where more money actually correlates with less happiness, which which kind of makes sense if you think about it, because there's a maintenance energy to like owning things and lifestyle. Like I used to think I wanted second homes in Japan and Seattle and Las Vegas and Hawaii and Spain and Italy. And I wanted to have a purple Ferrari and like and my own private jet. But you know what? Like having owned 35 properties across the United States, like owning things is a hassle.
My dad called it the boat tax.
The boat tax.
Because we had a boat growing up. He spent way more time fixing that thing than we ever did on the thing.
Oh my God.
My parents were big Beatles fans, and so they named the boat the Yellow Submarine.
Aww.
And it was the running joke because, you know, like, did you spend enough money on the boat this month or this year, or is it going to be at the bottom of the lake the next time we take it out?
Oh my God.
My parents were wonderful people. We never had any worries about the boat. My dad spent way too much time and money fixing it up. But just as a fun anecdote about like the cost, like he spent way more time and money on that thing than we ever got enjoyment out of it as kids, right? But he wanted a boat. So we got a boat.
Yeah. So now how much would it cost to rent a boat for the day?
Not very much.
Right? And you could have all that enjoyment and none of the hassle. And so like, as I really thought about this, I was like, well, do I actually want to own a home in Japan? Like, how often am I going to go there? And then I have to like have somebody maintain it and make sure it's okay while I'm not there. And then it's like, if I go to Japan, which I love, you know, I just went to Japan a few months ago. It was fantastic. Am I going to want to always stay at that place?
Yeah.
You know, or maybe I want to stay in Kyoto this time, Tokyo this time. So I was like, you know, I could, for like a fraction of the money, I could just stay at a really nice place with way less hassle. Yeah. And just be aware of that. You don't necessarily have to like own everything to enjoy it. And then that means that like you don't need as much money to live the lifestyle that you want, right? Because a lot of times we think, oh, well, you know, having a cabin here would make me happy, or going to Spain would make me happy. But like, there's cheaper ways to do that where you could get just as much or even more happiness. So when you tune into your, you know, enough and then some lifestyle where you're getting like the maximum joy for the money, now you know, okay, that's what I have to cover, yeah. Right? And so then once you know what your expenses are, then you know how much passive income you would need to become financially free at that level of lifestyle. Have you done that calculation?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So then you look at, okay, this is how much passive income I need. Now, how do you get more passive income? Right? So there's two main types of passive income. The first type comes from buying an asset, like basically taking some money and investing it in a thing that's going to make more money for you. So whether that's rental property or cryptocurrency or stocks or bonds or whatever. So have you thought about, have you looked at that? Where are you in your buying assets journey?
Yeah. So I have a Roth IRA.
Uh-huh.
So that's my primary vehicle right now.
Nice. Love Roth IRAs.
Yes. The next place that I'm looking at, which we were just talking about, is a house. Mm-hmm. So those are my two primary like buy assets.
Have you played with the financial freedom calculator to figure out like if you want to have this much in passive income by this date, and you feel like you can get this kind of return on your investment, this is how much money you would have to invest to do that?
I have not.
Okay, so that's a good next step. That's okay.
Well, and I want to point this out. So there was a moment there where I was tempted to lie, right? Yeah, because we're on camera. This video is going to go out to however many people.
Yeah, he works with a financial coaching company. Yes.
And Penelope and I were just talking about this. This is something that you model very well, and so I decided to model it as well. Is that like we're not perfect people? Yeah. Doesn't matter how good the plan is, right? Like. The plan could be great, and then the kids come home early, and you're like, well, I guess there's none of that today.
Yep.
And so as much as I would like to say, yes, I did the thing, no, I haven't. Because there's just, you know, life gets in the way. There's stuff that's more important.
Yeah, there's always things. Yeah, it's totally true. And this is why we really focus on progress, not perfection, right? So one nice thing is we've identified a next step for you, which is to like actually play around with it, right? So you can get a financial calculator for free, like an app on your phone, or you can go online and Google, you know, free financial calculator, and you can put in, you know, different rates of return, different amounts, and see like how much would you need to invest each month to get you where you want to go. Okay. So let's say you put that in and it says that in order to get where you want to go by the time you want to get, like, let's just say 65, since that's the thing. But let's say you wanted to get to a certain number by 65, because that would be a certain amount of passive income, accounted for inflation, blah, blah, blah. And let's say that you need to put in $10,000 a month. How does that make you feel?
Wow. Okay. Great. Have fun with that. I'll see you in the next life, apparently.
Right? So it's like, okay, back to my die before I run out of money plan, because sometimes you do these scenarios and it's like, okay,
there's so much this common advice, like, oh, just put away $500 a month, $1,000 a month since you were 20. And I was like, where is everybody getting all of this extra money? Like, maybe back in the day when you, like, when kids, you know, school cost $200 a month and, you know, rent was $400 a month or mortgage was $500 a month, you could find all of this extra money, but not in the Bay Area.
Yeah, cost of living is high and all of that. And so, like, let's say you run the scenario and you're like, $10,000 a month, that's what I would need to do. You might be like, okay, it's impossible, right? But there are levers and dials you can twist. And so what you want to do is you want to kind of like twist the dials until you come up with a plan where you're like, oh, that would work. Okay, so that's what we're going for. That's what we're going for. So let's say you start off, you know, $10,000 a month is what you need. Well, what if you could increase your financial education a little bit and you could get a better return on your investments? Like, if you could double your return on investment, then you would only need half as much going in, right? So you're like, so that's one dial that you can turn, is the what's your return on investment dial. As you increase your financial education, it becomes easier and easier to make more money. My first little passive income investment, other than just like interest on a savings account, was I bought a candy machine. It was like M&Ms on one side, peanut M&Ms on the other. And I put it in the lounge at my fencing club because I used to fence competitively. And I was there training like 4 or 5 days a week in Concord. I don't know if you ever went to a sword play or heard of it, but that was my club. I figured out like the cost of one M&M, decided how many M&Ms I wanted to give the other fencers for their 25 cents. I discovered that I knew what my profit margin was per sale, and I was making $25 a month in passive income after donating 10% back to the junior fencing program. So you're like, okay, $25, that isn't that much. But $25 a month times 12 divided by 500, my initial investment for the candy machine, that's a 60% ROI. 60% ROI. Now, that's a little bit more hassle than like a savings account that just sits there, or a dividend stock or something like that, because I have to like take the quarters out and put the M&Ms in. But come on, 60%, right? So as you learn these things, it becomes more accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something that you talk about all the time, which is like building an asset, right? Yeah. As opposed to buying something. So paying into a Roth IRA, I'm just like buying, you know, the stocks that you told me to buy.
And I'm pretty sure I didn't tell you to buy any stocks, because this girl does not give financial advice. What I do is I teach a methodology. Now, if you're following the methodology that I've taught you, that's a different thing, just to be clear.
This is why she gets paid the big bucks to talk, and I'm the one typically behind the camera. If you don't have the $5,000, $10,000 a month, right? Like, you can do something like the candy machine, where you start small, generate an ROI, take those profits, you know, invest back into the business, invest back. So like you grow it from the small seed to the big walnut tree, as opposed to, you know, investing in a lumber business.
Yeah.
If I like completely mangled those metaphors, I'm sure I did.
But it's like the dials. Okay, so one dial is your ROI. How much, what kind of return you're getting on your investments. And as you increase your financial education, you can increase that by a lot. Okay, so one dial is ROI. Another dial is time, right? So we've seen how, I mean, oh my God, when you look at like compound interest calculators, the more time you use something invested, it just becomes exponential. It's like mind blowing. So let's say, okay, I'm aiming for 65, but you know, what if I was willing to work till I was 70? I don't want that for you. I don't want that for you. But it's a dial, right? So you're like, what if I went till I was 70? Oh, well, then I would only need this much. That's feeling more accessible, right? And being able to get there at 70 is better than never, right? So that's another dial. And so you're looking at the dial of how much money you put in, the dial of time, and the dial of ROI. So fiddling. And then once you've gotten that like about as optimized as you can, then hopefully you're like, okay, I can do this. What would be an amount that you feel like is totally doable to put in investments every month?
Let's see, what's the thing that I spend the most money on right now? DoorDash.
DoorDash.
If I cut down on DoorDash, then I could probably swing like $1,000 a month.
Okay. So let's say you twist the dials enough to where you're maybe willing to go a little longer, get a better ROI, and you see that you got it down from $10,000 a month to $2,000 a month. You're like, well, I could do 1,000, 2,000. That's a stretch. Okay. Now
but the thing is though, is that it's way more of a doable stretch than 10,000. Like you tell me, well, you wouldn't tell me. I would figure it out on my own because you don't tell people anything. Well, you tell people lots of things, but you don't like give people exact numbers.
I'm not going to tell you buy this stock, you know?
Yeah. So if we sat down and like worked out my calculator and it was 2,000, like 2,000 is way closer of a finish line than 10,000. So at that point, I might be like, all right, well, do I like where are my expenses? How long would I have to spend 2,000, right? Like maybe I only need to spend 2,000 a month for a couple of years, and then suddenly I've got enough invested that my RO, like the compound interest is going, and after 5 years, then it drops down. I only need to invest 1,000. Mm-hmm. Well, okay, what can I live in a smaller place for a couple of years? Okay, maybe you could tweak it. We find out, okay, it's actually $1,750, and I'm like, okay, and I can find an extra $750 somewhere, and that's way more doable than doing
that. You're like, I could find an extra $750. So do you see, like, just in this moment, and thank you for being willing to like totally be put on the spot. But like,
we didn't plan this, by the way. We're just like, let's just sit down and talk.
Yeah. Do you see how just like having the specific numbers, now the gears are turning?
Yeah.
Right? You're like, ooh, maybe I could DoorDash a little less. Maybe I could do a side hustle. Maybe I could sell something. Like it's like you have that specific number, and then you start getting ideas for how to hit that number. And now instead of being like defeated, you're like creative and resourceful and expansive, right?
Yeah.
That's the emotional journey.
And something that just occurred to me too is, so I've been an employee for most of my life. I did dabble in being an entrepreneur for a little bit, but I've been an employee. And so the amount of money that I make each month is fairly fixed. Every time I've ever wanted to consider a side hustle, I was like, it's either the full-time job or the side hustle. So if I'm going to side hustle, I have to earn 5,000, 6,000, however much it cost me at the time to like live in the Bay Area. But if that number is 500, like, oh, I only need to earn an extra 500 a month in order to make this work. Like, that's way more doable from like a side hustle perspective. It's easier to wrap my mind around because the reason I've been an employee my whole life is because I could never wrap my mind around what kind of solo entrepreneur or side hustle could pay for my entire like Bay Area cost of living lifestyle. And so, but if I didn't have to pay for the whole thing and suddenly it was only $500, then, or 750 or even 1,000, then like suddenly my brain can conceptualize that and be like, oh, $500, $50 an hour, that's 10 hours. I can spend an extra 10 hours. Like suddenly my mind is figuring it out.
Yeah.
It's way more doable than like 5,000 to be like, how do you even come up with that kind of money?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you do the dials, right? And then you look at, okay, what can I do to generate more money or free up more money to invest? And one of the things that I love is looking at ways that you can grow your assets faster without taking away from your lifestyle. Like, for example, I don't know how much you pay in taxes, but being a contractor, like there's a lot of cool deductions and tax strategy and stuff that you can do to take money that was going to the government and now goes to building your assets instead. And then like, you don't even have to mess with your day-to-day cash flow. So there's opportunities like that, or even just like calling around and getting, seeing if you can get a lower rate on your insurance and then having the difference go into, set up an auto transfer, increase your auto transfer into your investment. So there's a lot of little hacks that you can do to increase the savings rate without even messing with your lifestyle. But what I see is based on where we started this conversation, which was like, all the social safety nets are gone. Like to like, wait a second, maybe I could do this or this. Like I see a shift in perspective from feeling like, man, this sucks, to, ooh, possibilities, right?
Yeah.
So that's the emotional journey. So you're fiddling, you're looking for a number that is something that you feel like you can do, or at least like it's close enough that you can see. So that's why I talked about like the difference between 1,000 and 2,000. You're like, okay, now let's talk about what if you get it down from 10,000 to 6,000. Like that still feels pretty big, right? So that's where you want to start looking at creating new streams of passive income. And it could be that you're able to invest more as your income goes up and over time. But if you are locked in, like we were talking about earlier, that might be hard. Then we can look at like, how could you create new streams of passive income from scratch? Like one of the things that you love is writing, right? So royalties from publishing your books, like that could be a new passive income stream that doesn't take any money to get started. That's coming from your time, your energy, your creativity, ideally doing something that you love anyway, right?
Yeah, it was funny. You were talking about like, do I need the cabin? And I was like, wait, do I need a cabin? I'm a writer. Do I need a cabin? But I am such a creature comfort person that even if I got like the writing cabin, I would be up there for like a day. And then I'd have to call somebody and be like, hey, can you read this thing that I just wrote? Is it any good? Like, give me your feedback on it.
Yeah.
So we, like my writer friends and I, we joke about the like old stereotype of going to the cabin for 6 months and writing your novel. It doesn't really exist anymore. And so, but if we did decide to get a cabin for 6 months, we would certainly rent it. Not
but I mean, like with Airbnb, right? You could rent a cabin for 6 months. I remember when I was Airbnb-ing my place in Campbell, like I kept it really low because I just wanted to have it be full. And there were a lot of nights where somebody could rent a room for $40 a night. So $40 a night times 30, that's what, like $1,200 a month? I mean, like where can you live in the Bay Area for $1,200 a month, right? So somebody could come and stay there for 6 months, like let go of, their place elsewhere, save a bunch of money. So I think that, again, there's just like ways that you can make it work.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about housing? Do we want to talk about housing, or do we want to leave it there?
I think let's leave it there. We don't want to give everybody everything right away, right? You got to stick around for round 2, or maybe not. Tell us in the comments if you actually are enjoying this format.
So I'm feeling like we've kind of like the arc is over with this part of the conversation, but there are a lot of creative ideas that we've talked about in terms of supporting Beacon to buy their first house that I'm really excited about. So let us know in the comments if you would like to do, if you'd like us to do another video on creative financing for Beacon's house, which of course could give you a lot of creative financing ideas for your own if you're looking at getting into real estate, either for a home to live in for yourself or investment property. There's a lot of like cool creative ways to do that that aren't like, get rich quick, blah, 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 but like legit, accessible ways to do it. So let us know if you want us to do that video. Thank you so much for being just like vulnerable and open and being willing to put on the spot. And thank you for your partnership and reaching more people with our message. Thank you for watching this. If you thought that this was helpful and interesting, please tap the like button, and perhaps we'll see you in the next video. I sure hope that recorded.
It did.